Coming up on this week's episode of TechSNAP, some old assumptions we made about the internet are coming back to haunt us. We'll explain victims of a cyber heist go after the bank that failed to protect them, and then we'll do a deep dive on that Synology malware that's demanding your data for bitcoins. Then it's a great big batch of your questions, our answers, and much, much more on this week's episode of TechSNAP. Hi, everyone, and welcome to TechSNAP. This is episode 175 of Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly Systems Network and Administration podcast. This episode is brought to you by our three fine sponsors, Ting, DigitalOcean, and IX Systems. I'll tell you more about those great sponsors as this here show goes on. Our live stream, that's powered by the incredible Scale Engine over at scaleengine.com. You've got to go check that out. My name is Chris, and joining us every single week is our host, the admin, the tech, and the teacher, Mr. Alan Jude. Hey there, Alan.
Hey, Chris, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Alan, 175, I'm feeling it today. It feels like a big episode for, I don't know. I feel like it's bigger than 150. Feels huge. Could be because it's a higher number. What do you think? That's just my theory.
Something like that.
Well, Alan, as you said earlier, we have, what did you call it? We got some fat stories, but you didn't mean like P8. Yes, you did say that. That's fine. I'll claim it. Fat, as in F-A-T. Some fat stories. We've got some great feedback because we put a call out there for some emails and we got them. And some great stories in the roundup, too. I'm looking forward to every single segment in today's show. The one we're going to start with is the one that caught my attention over the week. I'm super glad you put it in the lineup. Apparently, the internet is experiencing a little bit of growing pains. Is that accurate?
A little bit.
What's going on, Alan?
Turns out that the global routing table for the internet magically exceeded a threshold the other day. I guess it was Tuesday, probably, of 500,000 different routing entries.
Okay, 500,000 entries.
Yeah, getting closer to 512,000, although it depends on the hardware and your local configuration. But basically, many high-end routers, especially the Cisco's, use a system called TCAM, or Ternary Content Addressable Memory, to store the routing table so they can look it up really fast. The issue being that with the TCAM, you have to statically define what the size is going to be before you can start using it. And so the default on these routers made a couple of years ago and older was 500,000, which sounds like more than enough.
Who would ever need more than that, Alan?
Yeah, well, it turns out we do now. And the issue is to change the setting. A, you need enough memory to be able to hold more, and B, it requires changing the configuration and rebooting the router so that, because the TCAM is statically defined. The size, the region, is memory that can't be used by anything else. And so it's not something you can just change on the fly while the router is working.
You're not, especially the routers we're talking about that are critical, right?
Yeah.
Makes sense.
So content addressable memory works a bit differently than regular memory. With regular memory, when you want to save something in memory, you ask the operating system, hey, I need a chunk of memory this big, and it gives you the address for that memory, and you keep that. And then every time you want to pull that data, hey, give me the memory that's at this address. With content addressable memory, it works more like an associative array or a hash in programming, right? There's basically a key, which is normally in computer would be the address, but in this case, it's some bit of content, and then you get back the data that matches that. So with a CAM, it allows you to basically, by using almost like a hash, you can, say, I want this piece of data, and instead of having to know where it is, it's always going to be in the same place in the memory because it's all statically defined.
So that's nice and quick.
Yeah. So specifically, it works for the routing table, what they call a ternary CAM. Basically, instead of using binary, right, where you have on-off states or whatever for the address, it uses a thing that has three possible states, right? Ternary. So the three possible states are on and off like binary, and then a third possible state is don't care.
Interesting.
Right? It means that I don't care about this part of the address or of the tag or key, as long as the first part matches or the part that isn't set to do not care matches, then that's the route entry I want. So that works perfectly for routing tables because normally you have an IP address, right, which is a binary string of 32 bits, but it's broken up into two parts, right, the network part and the host part. Well, in a routing table, you only care about the networking part. right? So you just mark the rest of the bits as don't care. So when someone is trying to when your router gets a packet that's trying to go to such and such a network, right? It has the net mask and it masks it out and gets just the network part. And then in its TCAM, it can look up that bit of memory, which will in it tell it, which port and which address to send the data off on the router to get it to where it needs to go. Right? So as opposed to doing it in software, where basically you'd have this big routing table in memory, and you just start at the top and go through each entry. Is this the right one? Is this the right? Until you find the one that's right, and then
it takes forever as it gets big.
Right. Whereas with this, you just say, find the routing entry that matches this address, and it just, because it's content addressable memory, it can find the entry right away in one operation.
Right.
Instead of having to loop over every, scan all of the memory until it finds the right entry.
I dig.
But like I said, the problem with that is a TCAM has to be a static size because basically it's a hash bucket, right? You're dividing the memory up into chunks so that, by knowing what bit of information you have, where that'll fall in the memory, you can basically calculate the address. So it has to be a fixed size. So changing the size of the TCAM requires restarting the machine or the router.
That makes sense.
So like I said, on some of the routers, if the TCAM gets full, it'll fall back to software routing mode, where it'll do the search of the routing table in memory. The downside to that is that uses a lot of CPU time on top of being slower to begin with.
Yeah.
Well, most routers only have a tiny embedded CPU, like a little ARM or MIPS processor, right? A lot of these big routers are only like 200 megahertz processors because all the work is done by this TCAM hardware. They don't need anything bigger. Right, and the heavy lifting for the transmission and stuff is done by the line cards. It's all hardware. The software doesn't have to do that much. That's why you'll often see routers like that will not answer all pings. Right, if their CPU gets too busy, they'll stop answering pings.
Sure.
And it's for the same reason. They don't have that much CPU time to deal with stuff like that, and so that obviously caused huge performance problems. Although the issue is further complicated by a manufacturing defect in Cisco products produced between 2005 and 2010.
Oh, no.
Where there's a problem with the memory modules, such that they will degrade over time, and they'll still seem to work, but if you reboot, they won't work.
Oh, no.
Yeah. A lot of these devices, when people went and did the reload after making the setting change, they found that the device or one specific line card or something wouldn't come back up, and they would have to replace that piece of hardware.
Yikes. I'm reading Cisco's announcement, too, and it looks like it's affecting a lot of people.
Yeah, Cisco's already committed to spending like $600 million just
655.
Yeah. So it's like, we'll replace the line card when it fails. You'll be down until you replace it, or you buy another one, or have a spare, or whatever.
Right.
But
yeah, they're owning it, but at the same time, like it doesn't fix the problem.
They're not doing a recall where they're going to replace it for you.
Right.
It's like if it dies and it's still under warranty, we'll replace it.
Yeah.
Because it is our fault. Well, the fault of a manufacturer that produced these memory modules that were a problem. Anyway, so the issue of this problem happening was actually brought up early in May at NANOG, the North American Network Operators Group, which is basically an industry association of the people that run these big routers. And this is kind of a back channel where they talk to each other and get problems solved and share knowledge and stuff, even though they're basically, most of them are working at competing ISPs. But they kind of have this fellowship about, we're the guys that run the internet. We need to be able to talk not through our corporate masters kind of thing.
Right.
Anyway.
The corporate masters do sponsor it. I noticed.
Yes.
Google, Microsoft, yeah.
Well, it's less Google, Microsoft. It's more, the big ISPs that are actually competing.
Yeah.
With
That
each
makes
other.
sense.
But they also have to send traffic to each other, right? Almost all the tier ones are peered with each other by definition, and so they need to have these. It's always good if your counterpart at the other company you're dealing with is, someone you kind of know.
Yeah.
Anyway, so there was a nice heads-up email about it sent to the FreeBSD mailing list with a bunch of links and stuff, and that's how I first got a lot of this information, so I included a link to that as well. So then around May 12th, I think it was, Cisco announced the problem, warning people that, hey, we're getting close to this limit, and when we hit it, you're going to have problems if you have these certain Cisco devices, which is like the Catalyst 6500, 7600, ASR 9000, ASR 1000, and a bunch of other stuff.
Oh, cha-ching, cha-ching.
Yeah, like these are really expensive devices.
Yeah, these are some of the routers that are running the internet. I mean,
exactly. Yeah, these are the ones that are holding 500,000 unique routes in the routing table.
Yeah,
right. This isn't the one that goes at your house or the one that goes at your company or probably even almost the one that goes at your ISP. It's the one that goes at your ISP's ISP. Yeah, and you know, there was an interesting stuff in the FreeBSD link also talking about the cost of each additional route, mostly having to do with the software and stuff you have to pay Cisco for these big iron things. And they calculated it costs about $3,600 a year for each route in the routing table.
No way.
And being that there are 500,000, that means that across the whole internet, people spend $3 billion a year on the maintenance of the internet infrastructure.
Way. That seems a little high, don't you think?
Well, that's basically the cost of everything, right?
But did you say 300 billion?
It'd be 3 billion.
Oh, 3 billion. Okay.
Right, because there's 500,000 routes, and each one costs $3,600.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought you said 300 billion.
Yeah, 3 billion. But that's the cost of all of the hardware and upgrading it, right? And the support contracts from Cisco and stuff, the people to run it, all the stuff.
Well, and what do you think of that stat, Alan? That fact in the face of net neutrality and carriers and operators who want to try to maybe do a little traffic shaping to reduce the infrastructure requirements.
But that doesn't really change the routing table.
No. But I mean, when you look at the cost of
peering does actually change the routing table.
And just outside of that, just the cost of this infrastructure and this hardware that they're talking about. I don't know. I just find it to be an interesting perspective. I mean, there's obviously a run cost is essentially what this comes down to.
Right.
A lot of times in the debate, especially recently, I've heard, well, once the carriers install this stuff, it never costs them a cent after that other than the power. And I think that's a little bit, and this sort of underscores that.
Obviously,
it's a bit of a misunderstanding.
Support contracts cost money.
Well, yeah, and annually.
Yeah. And, the hardware does need to be upgraded. The cards do fail over time.
Mm-hmm. The memory tables fill up.
Yeah, and all kinds of stuff. But, it also kind of underscores the fact that maybe we should get away from the monoculture of Cisco hardware as well.
Yeah, that does kind of show
Juniper. FreeBSD.
Oh.
Go.
Well, Alan, any other thoughts on that story?
No, I just have Cisco has a document they put out recently that gives you the steps to reconfigure your Catalyst 6500 and 7600 to avoid the issue.
There you go.
To solve the issue, although you still need to reboot it in order for that to take effect.
Nothing to worry about, folks. Nothing to worry about. All right, Alan. Well, I'll take a second here and thank our first sponsor. Talk about solving some problems. That's Ting.com. Go over to TechSNAP.Ting.com. That lets them know that you appreciate them supporting the show. And also, we'll take $25 off your first Ting device. If you've already got a Ting device, good news. They'll give you a $25 credit, and that paid for more than my first month of Ting, and it'll probably pay for yours. You can find out by trying out their savings calculator. Here's what's great about Ting. You only pay for what you use. They add your minutes, your messages, your megabytes. They just whatever you used, that's what you pay. It's very simple. It's a flat rate for the line, so it's $6 per line. You add a phone to your line, another $6. And then it's just the usage of that line. And they have a bunch of great phones you can choose from, either directly from Ting or previously used, or ones you can bring yourself. In fact, they have a BYOD page that makes it all really simple for which devices you can bring. And one of the things I love about Ting is they also have an early termination relief program. So if you're like me, and you've had that realization that all of these fancy phones got you all excited, all hot and bothered, you went out there and got yourself into some stupid contracts, you did some things that, in retrospect, hindsight being 2020, probably wasn't actually the most financially smart move, was maybe driven by the shiny factor, things like that. I know I fell into that trap. And when I came to that realization, I saw the Ting model where hotspot and tethering is included. Caller ID, picture messaging, text messaging, all of that's just bundled right in there. You only pay for what you use. $6 a month, no contract, no early termination fee. I looked at that and I thought, okay, this is obviously the model. Now, they didn't have this when I became a Ting customer. But since I became a Ting customer, they have introduced their early termination relief program where they will pay up to $75 per line that you have to get canceled. So you're going to get a $75 credit per line, okay? Then if you bring a device over, you're going to get another $25 credit. You might be able to switch to Ting and go several months without having to pay your bill. I mean, that's a possibility because right now my bill has been ridiculously low. I recently got an iPhone 5 from Ting. I loaded iOS 8 on here, and my son from his iPad figured out how to use FaceTime, which is adorable. My phone rings, it's my 5-year-old son, and now he and I are having a phone call over Wi-Fi, and my minutes have dropped way down. I'm saving even more money with Ting. And when I want to see where I'm at, I can go check out their awesome dashboard, which is super intuitive, very powerful, gives you a snapshot of exactly where you're at. And what's really cool is it's also paired with mobile apps that work on iOS or Android. You can go in there and manage your lines, set up call forwarding, all of that stuff. And last but not least, if you ever end up getting stuck, Ting has awesome customer service. You can call them at 1-855-TING-FTW anytime between 8 a.m. or 8 p.m. And a real Canadian answers the phone. And they'll help you. They're empowered to help you. Also, check out their blog if you kind of want to get a beat on what Ting is about as a company. They have a blog where they're very transparent. They just talked about a new business partner they signed up with. They've talked recently about how the talks of T-Mobile and Sprint merging or not merging would affect Ting customers. Yep. They have app picks up there. For me now, as a long-term Ting customer, this blog serves as a continuous source of insights into the company and sort of revalidates to me all the time why I know I've made the right choice. And I believe my choice isn't just saving me money. I believe my choice is helping clean up the wireless industry and demonstrating to the monopolies how they should be doing it. And I believe in using my money to vote with how I want my services to be delivered, how I want to be treated as a customer. TechSNAP.ting.com. And a really big thank you to Ting for sponsoring the TechSNAP program. It rocks. TechSNAP.ting.com. The FaceTime stuff is super fun, too. Oh, look at that. That is neat. I love the future, Alan, where we got video messaging over Wi-Fi and all that. Or you could do it over LTE, too, but I'm trying to save me some money. So sometimes, speaking of saving money, as a company, you're a victim of a cyber heist, a cyber attack, and you just want to strike back. Get a little bit back. Get a piece. Is that what our next story is about, Alan? I got a sense.
Not quite.
Oh, I wanted a war story where they go after the attacker. They extract him for every dollar.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's not what this is really about at all.
Okay. All right. Because I kind of built it up, kind of hyped it a little bit, Alan.
Yeah. So anyway, a Tennessee-based company is suing their bank over a cyber heist, specifically because the bank didn't follow the proper procedures.
Oh, I actually like this more.
Okay. Yes. So the company, Tennessee Electric, was the target of a cyber heist where Russian or Ukrainian malactors took over their corporate bank account and managed to siphon off $327,804 from the company's accounts with Tri-Summit Bank. Now, the company had an agreement with the bank where the bank would phone and verify all transfers of funds out of their account, specifically to deal with things like this, right? So that money wouldn't just disappear from their account without their say-so.
Makes sense.
The company only became aware that they had been the victim of a heist when they actually got a phone call from Brian Krebs.
Oh, no.
Like, hey, I was just talking to one of the mules I had identified, and they mentioned, that they had just got $11,000 out of your account.
No.
So you might want to, check into this and find out how much money is being stolen.
Oh, my gosh. Boy, that would be a call you never want to... When your phone rings and it's Brian Krebs on the other line, just go, oh, crap. Damn it. That's incredible.
So I have a series of little chunks of Brian Krebs' article here. So according to the complaint that the company filed in court to try to get their money back, the attackers first struck on May 8th after Tennessee Electric's controller tried unsuccessfully to log into their bank's website and upload the week's payroll batch file, which normally is about $200,000 a week. When the controller called Tri-Summit to inquire about problems they were having with the website, the bank said the site was probably undergoing maintenance and that the controller was welcome to visit the local branch and upload the files there.
It's no big. Site goes down all the time. Don't worry about it.
So the controller did just that, went and uploaded their 4 payroll batches that were worth about $202,000. On May 9th, Tennessee Electric alleges that Tri-Summit Bank called to confirm that $202,000 payroll batch. As per their agreement, where the utility would get a call from the bank to verbally verify all payment orders. But according to Tennessee Electric, the bank, for some reason, had already approved a payroll draft of $327,804 sent to 55 different accounts across the U.S.
What?
Even though the bank had never called and got verification for that. Right?
Fail.
So on May 8th, the attackers stole the money, and then the company made the regular transfer. And then on May 9th, the company gets the call asking to approve the regular transfer, and they do, but the bank never asked about the transfer of the stolen money.
And to 55 different accounts across the U.S., you think that would jump out to the bank and say...
Well, yes, that's the other thing, is the company's alleging in their lawsuit is like, it's a lot more than usual. Yeah. It wasn't on the... We always do it on Tuesday, and this was done on a Wednesday.
And a whole bunch of new destinations.
Yeah, and it's a bunch of like out-of-state people, which we've never done before.
That right there should be the red flag.
Yeah, all like basically list up all these things that should have been red flags. On top of the fact that the bank didn't get approval before they sent the money.
Right.
So then Tennessee Electric alleges that the bank only called to seek approval for the fraudulent batch transfer the next day on May 10th, more than the day after they had already approved it. So the money was already gone, but the bank called to try to get verification that it was allowed anyway, even though it was already too late. And that's... But the bank basically didn't call to get approval until after Brian Krebs had already called.
Right, when they
Tennessee
realized.
Electric and told them that, hey, you've been robbed.
Yeah. Oh, we better get this in the log, they thought to themselves.
And then the bank calls and tries to says, is this, you're approving this, right?
Yeah, I mean, not like, that we haven't already done
it. What are you talking about? Yeah. It's like, what do you mean the money's already gone? Gosh. You're supposed to call us first, not 2 days later.
Love it. You know, they're just the bank, Alan.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Just the bank. It's just their job.
So specifically, Tennessee Electric's account appears to have been compromised using a man-in-the-browser attack. So malware was installed somehow on their computer, probably a phishing attack, or there's plenty of different ways they could have gotten in the computer and installed the malware. And it man-in-the-browser, as we talked about before, is malware that changes what is displayed to the user when they visit the online banking site. So in a traditional one, like the Zeus man-in-the-browser attack, it would do something like, you go to your bank's website, and you get the regular login screen, you log in, and then maybe it pops up a thing asking you one of your secret questions. Now, your bank wasn't asking you the secret question, but the attacker was trying to do a transfer using your account after they already stole your username and password.
And they need the answer.
And they need the answer to do this high-risk transaction.
Right.
So they ask you and make it look like it's part of the regular login process.
It's genius, really. But
and then they can just keep doing it until they get the answers to all your questions.
Yeah. And honestly, me as a user, like I would think, my bank site is making me enter this again.
My bank asks me that every time it's an IP address I haven't used before or a browser I haven't used before.
Yeah.
And stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I probably wouldn't notice if it just popped up one time.
Especially a regular user who might not realize it's tied to something changing, like an IP.
Yeah, it's not random. It's actually tied to something.
To them, it might actually appear random because maybe they clear their cookies and cache one time and it pops up, or they get a new browser, they switch from Firefox to Chrome, and so to them, it just happens from time to time.
Yeah. And then they'll transfer the money out of your account. But the man-in-the-browser attack is smart. What it'll do is when you're looking at your account statement, it'll just delete the line of the money disappearing and adjust the balance line and all the other lines to make it look like the amount of money you expect is still there. So even though, if you went and spent money at the store or something, it'll show that transaction and show your amount, your balance going down by that much, even though your balance is actually much, much lower because they've stolen all your money. So in this particular one, the controller of the company said that she was asked for and supplied the output of her one-time token to log in. And then she was directed to a page that said that, sorry, the site's down for maintenance right now. After she had put in her token, and that's when the attackers used her token to siphon off all the money. Now, it seems that these attackers were probably doing surveillance and like advanced persistent threat on these guys for a while.
Yeah.
Because they didn't do just like, the automatic clearinghouse transfer or a wire transfer or something. They submitted it as if it was the payroll for the month with, it's like, pay this much to this account, this much to this.
Yep.
And so
that's pretty detailed.
It seems like, this company, this bank had kind of a custom system, and like, these guys might have been watching for a while to see how it works in order to submit one that would go through. And so TriSummit Bank, after the company's like, hey, our account's been hacked or whatever, the bank was able to claw back about $135,000 of the funds because they've been.
Womp womp.
But so they were able to get back that much of the money, but that left the utility out about $200,000.
So they are this utility that's now suing the bank?
Yeah, they're suing the bank for the $200,000 because the bank didn't provide enough protection or didn't catch that this was fraud.
I kind of like that. I kind of feel like I would sue my bank because I know from a technology standpoint that they probably didn't do enough, and I might be able to make that case.
Well, specifically, personal accounts have this provision that says that you have as long as you report it within 60 days, you have almost no liability for.
But maybe not same with business accounts.
But businesses don't get that.
Okay.
They don't enjoy the same liability protection, and the Krebs article talks a bit more about it specifically. But basically, as long as the bank takes what they call like industry standard steps or whatever, then anything that happens is the business's problem.
Right. The bank passes their audits, they check all their boxes, dot all their I's.
Yeah.
They're fine.
And it's basically, as long as reasonable security, which is completely undefined. And so a couple of companies have tried to sue.
Okay.
But in general, the problem is that your legal fees going up against a bank are going to be so high that,
Turns out the bank can afford legal counsel pretty easily.
Right. As if it's not a huge amount, you're not going to bother. And even if it is, if you're fighting for a couple of years and you're missing the money the whole time, it's probably not going to end up working out that well for you. There have been some cases where people have lost against the bank, where the court says, yes, the bank did reasonable steps, and so, sorry, you got hacked. Whereas there's one or two where, even after that, during an appeal, the higher court ruled that the bank hadn't taken enough steps, and so on. In this particular case, specifically, the bank and the company had an agreement where the bank would seek verbal authorization of all transfers via the phone, and that didn't happen. And so in this particular case, I think the bank is liable, but I think in a lot of the cases, that might not be the case.
I'm trying to think back to my time at the bank, and I know when you mentioned that, as long as they've passed all of their checks, we would very quietly deal with these kinds of problems at the bank I worked at. Now, that bank doesn't even exist anymore, but what they would do is very quietly work with the business customer, and a lot of times, if the business customer would push, they would give simply because they didn't want people to know that this was such a widespread problem.
Right, they didn't want people to feel like their bank wasn't secure.
Yeah, they wanted confidence. Yeah. They wanted them to have confidence. And so they would just kind of, a lot of times, pay up a lot of money to cover this kind of stuff. So it's interesting, this bank maybe didn't do that?
No. They got back what they could claw back, and they said, sorry, you're out of luck.
Yeah. That's how it goes.
So Krebs also mentions he has an online banking best practices for business article that talks about, maybe consider using a live CD or have a dedicated computer for doing your company's banking, and resist the temptation to do anything else on it ever, right? If you don't, read emails, and you don't open attachments, and you don't go to other websites, you're just going to your bank's website, and that's the only thing that computer does, it's much less likely that computer will get infected.
Do you like the idea of a live CD? Does that seem practical to you, a live CD?
It can be.
Or a live thumb drive?
Well,
a CD might be
the downside to the thumb drive is that it can be writable.
Yeah.
The upside is it's easier to keep it updated, right?
Exactly.
What good's a live CD if you're using, a 6-month-old version of Firefox?
And it's faster too. Right. Yeah. See, that's the main problem I have with the live CD is it's so easy to fall behind. In fact, a lot of live CDs like Knoppix are already shipping out-of-date browsers.
Yeah,
even though they just updated.
Even if you just go back like 6 months, now you're using a live CD that's vulnerable to Heartbleed.
Yes, exactly. Or perhaps the entire operating system. Maybe they have an old version of the library on there. It's one of these things where the thumb drive has a disadvantage of being written to. It has a limited amount of write cycles.
You might be able to make it read-only, though.
Yeah, you could. Oh, totally, you could. I guess if you're doing this, you're probably smart enough to think about doing that.
And specifically, you can do stuff like you can have a memory file system. So like you got your read-only system, maybe a small amount where you actually like your home directory where you can actually save some stuff.
Right.
And then all the temporary files and stuff go in a memory file system that gets erased when you reboot, so that you don't burn up the write cycles.
Okay, what about if you had a lot of machines you wanted to do this with? Say you had a department you wanted to do this, maybe 5, 6, 7, up to 20 machines. What about a network boot? Like, what about an image on the network that is write protected?
Or a virtual machine or something.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, VM, sure. Yeah. All right, Alan, any other thoughts on that story?
No, that's about it on that one.
So, yeah.
But the Krebs article has even more detail and talks about, how he found out about it and relayed it to the company and stuff.
Really funny that they found out when he called them. I mean,
yes, and they mentioned that in the lawsuit, although they spell his name wrong.
Oh, bummer. It's no good. That's no good.
Apparently, they don't read his website, right? All they had is the phone calls, so they don't really, I guess, know how to spell his last name properly.
Well, maybe they can wait for the movie, and then they'll get it right once the Krebs movie comes out. We're gonna have to talk about that movie if it ever actually.
I'm kind of interested in his book because I know quite a bit from the inside of that same industry, and it's like.
When do we know when that? When is that?
The book comes out in October or November. I think.
Is that the one he's advertising on the side of his site here?
Yes. Yeah, it's Spam Nation.
Yep. You know what? I'm just gonna pre-order it right now, so I don't mess that up. Spam Nation. Pre-order your copy of Spam Nation.
Yes. Find out how the spam industry works from the inside.
Totes doing that. Yeah, I mean, Kindle. Yep. Boy, it's already a #1 bestseller. Really? When's it out? Huh. I guess the Kindle version's already out, Alan. Did you know that?
Oh, I did not know that.
No. Oh, no, it is a pre-order. I'm sorry. How can it already be a best? I guess the pre-orders are going really well. Yeah. Holy smokes. Well, congratulations, Brian Krebs. That's great. Yeah, it's supposed to come out on November 18th, and it's already a #1 bestseller on Amazon. All right.
I'm sure his audience is kind of leans toward Amazon as opposed to physical bookstores.
Yeah. Spam Nation from Brian Krebs coming out in November, and then the movie after. Well,
yes. When is the movie?
I don't know. I don't even know if they have a date yet. I don't think.
Yeah, I don't even know if they started production or anything. They just announced that we should do a movie about Brian Krebs because he's popular.
There has never been a better time to be in this industry. It's unbelievable. It's crazy I feel like I've been there since the industry was created, when penetration testing wasn't even called penetration testing. And now to see some people that are becoming so famous that their books are #1 bestsellers, and they're getting movies made about them, and they're talking about computer security.
In his particular case, he's not even really a pen tester or something, right? He's a
researcher,
a journalist that learned a lot about computers.
Yeah.
And just has sources and is good at talking to people and getting people to talk to him.
Well, Alan, let me take a minute and tell you about something else that's #1, and that's DigitalOcean. Go over to DigitalOcean.com, and by the way, we got a promo code, SNAPAugust. SNAPAugust, all lowercase, will get you a $10 credit. Let me tell you a little bit about DigitalOcean and why that $10 credit will actually get you pretty far. DigitalOcean is a simple cloud hosting provider dedicated to offering the most intuitive and easy way to spin up a cloud server. You can create a cloud server, probably about 55 seconds, maybe less, and pricing plans start. Get ready for this. Brace your brain. $5 per month. That'll get you 512 megabytes of RAM, a 20 gigabyte SSD, 1 CPU, and a terabyte of transfer connected to Tier 1 bandwidth. DigitalOcean has data center locations in New York, San Francisco, Singapore, Amsterdam, and a brand new one in London. They've got a couple in some of those locations as well, so you can choose from multiple different data centers in that region. And the thing that I think that really grabbed me when I tried out DigitalOcean. The way I found out about DigitalOcean was from my co-host Michael Dominic on Coda Radio, and he said, I don't know if you know this, but there's this company that uses all Linux on the back end, and for the last year, I've been using them as the infrastructure for a bunch of apps that have tens and tens and tens of thousands of users. You might want to check out DigitalOcean. So I went over there and checked them out, but the thing that grabbed me when I finally went over there after Mike's recommendation was that dashboard. Wow. Yep. So much awesome technology. Really, I mean, anybody can do this, but to do it with this kind of interface that still gives you the functionality you would want as a long-time sysadmin is amazing. And when you use that promo code SNAPAugust, you'll get the $10 credit. Well, you can get that $5 rig, the one I've been using for months and months and months. You can try it out for 2 months for free because you get the $10 credit. SNAPAugust. SNAPAugust, when you check out over at DigitalOcean, will give you that $10 credit. Go create a machine. Try out their one-click deployment. Go deploy your own GitLab. You don't need to go create an account on GitHub. Go over to DigitalOcean, a $5 droplet. You can have your own private GitLab.
If you do want to set up your own CGit, and Gitolite and stuff. We just did a tutorial on that.
On BSD. Now.
BSD now,
Episode
50.
No, 50? No,
Yep.
50 was the OpenVPN.
Right. It wasn't our tutorial. It was somebody else's.
Ah, cool. I didn't know that. That's really neat, Alan. And the great thing about DigitalOcean too is you could spin up a lot of stuff like OpenVPN, OwnCloud, BitTorrent Sync, backend infrastructure, Nginx. They have a lot of one-click deployments too. They'll use containers if you want to make it isolated. If you want to have one-click deployment update capabilities, they've got an HTML5 console written in Go. They've got two-factor authentication, DNS management, droplet backup and restore, transfers, private networking, which doesn't count against your bandwidth transfer at all. And it's all for a fixed cost.
Especially if you have a backend database or if you're doing backups between your droplets.
And you want something secure that isn't transmitting over the public web. DigitalOcean.com. Use the promo code SNAPAugust when you check out. I think you'll be really impressed. DigitalOcean.com. And a big thank you to DigitalOcean for sponsoring the TechSNAP program. Snap August. Go get that $5 rig, even for just a couple of months. And you can then quickly step it up from there. Their pricing plans are really straightforward. It's like an actual human being invented them. Surprise, surprise. So it's pretty cool. Alan, this next story, as a Synology user, I'm extremely fascinated at the evolution of SynLocker, right? This is the one where they can get on your... Yes, Synolocker, where you can get on like the Synology NAS boxes, encrypt the files, and hold them for ransom, right?
Yeah, so F-Secure did a 3-part blog series on how it actually works. Like, they basically deconstructed it.
Cool.
And then at the end, they have some interesting news about it as well. They did an in-depth look at how Synolocker actually works and how it encrypts files. Specifically, they were looking to see if it was the same kind of thing as CryptoLocker,
right?
And if it was maybe from the same people.
That's what I was wondering.
But they found that it was not. That it's done quite a bit differently. Like, obviously, it uses RSA and AES and stuff, but that's
kind of
where
standard
the similarities
stuff.
ends.
Yeah. Okay.
Specifically, it says that it kind of generates an RSA key pair on the victim machine and leaves the public key on the victim and then sends the private key off to the bad guys. And then it can encrypt a file to the public key, and then only that private key that only the bad guy has now can decrypt it. But they also come up with a random initialization vector, which is based on the name and size of the file plus some random stuff. And then they also do an HMAC on the file to make sure it didn't get corrupted. So they actually take a bunch of steps that are fairly standard in cryptography, but you wouldn't think they would bother with when they're just ransoming off your files. But it kind of suggests that it's someone that knows the right way to do these things rather than someone that just whipped together, we'll just encrypt the file.
Right.
For encrypting the actual contents of the victim file, Synolocker uses AES with that initialization vector. And that initialization vector is later used by the encryption algorithm, but is also used and combined with the randomly generated string to generate the actual encryption key. So the password that's used for the AES is unique for each file. So you have to have that private key in order to decrypt your files.
Right.
If they used the same AES key for every file, if you brute forced it, you would get all your files back. With this one, you'd have to brute force each file separately. So the contents of the original file are encrypted. Simultaneously, they also calculate the HMAC that's used to verify the integrity of the data. And they write all this to a file. Basically, once it's finished encrypting, it replaces the original file with the new one. In the new file, it has the RSA encrypted random string. That's the AES key. Next, it writes out a marker, the real pwned 40X's, 1237, etc. That's used to identify that this file is encrypted, so it can look at any file and quickly tell whether it's one of the encrypted ones or not, so that it's the decryption program you pay for can quickly deal with the files. So after that marker, they write down the initialization vector that was used because they need that to decrypt it as well. Next, the encrypted version of the original file contents are written to the new file, and finally, the HMAC generated is appended to the end of that. And then it goes and overwrites the original file with gibberish to make it harder for you to, just undelete or to manually recover your data. And it only once everything is done will it actually replace the original file with a new one, so that if something goes wrong or there's an error, it won't actually erase the original data. So while it's there to ransom off your data, it seems very careful to not accidentally destroy your data. Because you might be a little upset if you paid and didn't get your data back. But at the same time, because it's Bitcoin, it's not like you're going to be able to get a refund. You can't call up your credit card company and try to renege on the payment.
No chargebacks for Bitcoin.
Yep, exactly.
I noticed, too, Alan, a little copious use of BitMessage here. Please contact support via BitMessage.
Right, so yes, the other thing here was that F-Secure also found out that the guy who runs Synology appears to want to be getting out of the business.
He's like,
or to hurry up and get people to pay him.
And look, he's even advertising like, I have 5,500 unclaimed private keys.
So specifically, they said, as of yesterday, that in 6 days and 6 hours, he was shutting the website down. So if you need to decrypt your files, you better pay him soon. He also says, if you lost your identifier, the public side of the key, he has a copy of that. And if you can give him the MAC address of your NAS, he can give you your public key back so that you can decrypt your files. If you updated the software on your Synology, then you'll need a special custom decryption tool because the regular one won't work if you've messed around with it too much.
If you got bit by this, I mean, you didn't know it and you did an update to prevent being bit by
Or rather,
this.
if you if you were in the middle of getting bit by it when you upgraded, probably.
Yeah.
And so it stopped it encrypting the rest of your files, but you want to get the original ones back, you need a special version of the tool he's made for you.
Gosh, what a nightmare.
But in that case, you should contact support and his support BitMessage address, and he'll give you the data.
Think about the people, the majority of the people that are buying devices like this. I mean, they're somewhat technically savvy because they know what the hell a NAS is, but they're not necessarily any savvier than just that. You know? I feel bad for them. Because there could be family photos, family videos on these things. I mean, really personal stuff.
Well, the interesting one would be the people that don't realize that their files have been encrypted
until it's too late. And then this, and what if that happens? Like, what if this happens years later, right? Because it's just sitting on this NAS.
Even a month later, in this case, if he's closing the website down in 6 days.
Yeah.
So he says there are 5,500 unclaimed private keys. So those are people whose files were encrypted and they haven't paid to decrypt them yet. And he's willing to sell that database for 200 Bitcoins, whereas each key was going for 0.6 of a Bitcoin. With 5,500 unclaimed keys at 0.6 of a Bitcoin is just shy of $2 million.
Yeah, let me see here. 200.
Whereas 200 Bitcoins is about $120,000. So
Bitcoin is down today.
Into this business,
Bitcoin is down today, but yeah, it's still an unbelievable amount of money.
$600 about each Bitcoin. If you wanted to get into this business, you could buy these 5,500 unclaimed private keys and then try to sell them for 1 Bitcoin each or something. The downside, obviously, is that anybody who really wanted their files back and was going to pay probably already has. So I'm not sure that those 5,500 unclaimed keys are worth $100,000.
I agree with Denny. We are in the wrong business. You and I, instead of teaming up to do a podcast, should have teamed up to do this kind of crap. I think we could have been great. I think we could have been magic. Could be rich too, Alan. Rich beyond our dreams.
Stupid conscience.
Stupid microphones and podcasting and conscience. Yeah, I mean, because you think about this guy.
He says that if somebody doesn't buy it, then in basically 5.5 days, the website and all related databases will be deleted, and you will not be able to have your files.
But the thing is, this guy could just go about and do this again some other time, and maybe he makes. Say he never makes 200 Bitcoins. Maybe he makes 50 Bitcoins, but he does it every few months, right? I mean, what's going to stop him?
If he will have hit almost everybody he can hit already, right?
Yeah, it would have to be something besides Synology. This also, I'm positive it can't be the first use of BitMessage with malware authors like this, but I think it's one of the more recent stories we've covered where you actually see them communicating via BitMessage. It's kind of, I feel like news on BitMessage has gone silent.
This definitely makes, if you can imagine being the person whose Synology got hacked, and especially being a not very technical user, and you'd have to basically learn what BitMessage is and how to use it.
What is it? Yeah.
What Bitcoin is and how to use it, and then deal with all that other stuff. And it doesn't sound like it seems like they probably could have made more money if they had easier ways to pay. The downside is that, that's how you get caught at the same time, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good point. Like, using Bitcoin would mean they probably get more payment. No, I mean, not using Bitcoin would probably mean they would get more payments, but they would get caught faster. So it's probably almost worth it in a way, All right, Alan, any other thoughts on that story?
No, that's about it.
Okay. All right. Well, then why don't I take a second to talk about our friends at iX Systems, the folks that make some of the best systems powered by Intel's awesome Xeon processors. Go over to ixsystems.com/TechSNAP. If you want to get a rig built by a group of folks that, I'm so jealous of them in a way because they are in a position that is very envious. They have people that are passionate about the software, they have people that are passionate about the hardware, and they have people that are passionate about the customers. And they have found a way to take those three different worlds and bring them all together. And not only bring them together in a way that is profitable, but bring them together in a way that benefits the community, that it brings more people into developing for open source hardware and software. It brings more people in to communicate with each other that are creating amazing services that run on top of these hardware. iX Systems invests at the hardware level, at the customer level, and at the community level, and it really stands out. In fact, Meet BSD is coming up. That's a good example of their community investments.
Yep. They launched the official website for it now, so you can go to meetbsd.com.
Oh, I'll go there right now.
It's November 1st and 2nd in San Jose, California. It'll actually be held at the headquarters of Western Digital, who are kindly letting us use a bunch of rooms at their campus to have our event. Because
man, I wish I was going to
iX
that.
Systems has very good partnerships with their suppliers, like Western Digital and Supermicro and LSI. So, we were able to do that. So also, this is a hybrid unconference. So it's a lot more social. Rather than just the lecture style talks like BSDCan and EuroBSDCon, there's only like 2 or 3 of those at the whole conference. The rest of the days are made up of speed geeking, which is this thing where there'll be like 10 subject matter experts spread around the room, and you'll be assigned into a group so that you're forced to interact with people you don't know.
That's good for us sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. It's a bunch of geeky people. You have to do things like this. And so you get in a group of 4 or 5 people or so, depending on how many people are at the conference. And you go and you sit in a little circle with the subject matter expert, and they spend 10 minutes giving you a brief introduction to some topic. Something they're working on, something they did. You can ask them questions, find out what other people's questions are and stuff. And then at the end of 10 minutes, ding or whatever, and you move on and go to the next one. It's kind of like speed dating, right? And you go through the 10 different people, and instead of in the regular lecture type conferences like BSDCan, there'll be 3 talks going on at once, and you can only be in one place.
That is so frustrating sometimes.
Questions is like wait till the end for the questions, and you don't really get
brilliant
to talk with the other people.
Yes,
this gives you much more two-way.
Yes,
and it gives you exposure to a little bit of everything. Like I learned at the one I went to, my first Meet BSD was 2012 when it was at Yahoo, and I learned a lot about different things I wouldn't have even have heard of before. Like on NetBSD, they were working on this idea of network shared memory. So like shared memory normally, except for it's shared between a bunch of separate computers.
That's cool.
But yet they all have this shared memory region of memory, and I thought that would be really interesting looking at the PHP opcode cache, and specifically storing like session data and having that be shared across all the systems. Instead of currently we use something like memcache, right? But actually having it be kind of taking over the intrinsic of the operating system and doing it that way instead. Now, if there had been a talk about that technology in NetBSD for an hour at a conference, there probably would have been one of the other 2 talks would have been higher priority for me. But because this was 10 minutes, I got to see a little bit of everything, including a little Segway-style robot that could go and get coffee, and you controlled it with a HTML5 web browser.
I just found evidence. I'm on their site, and I just found a picture of you at one of their conferences. So if I was a TechSNAP viewer and I was interested in BSD, or I wanted to meet Alan Jude, maybe I would go to Meet BSD in California. Is that what you're telling me?
For sure.
And why do you think iX Systems does this? I mean, as a company, I got to tell you, this has got to be to them a pretty big cost center. So why do you think iX Systems? They're not there. They're not selling machines while they're there. They're not there, trying to get you to buy a server. Why are they doing this, Alan?
Well, the more people they convert to using BSD and using their stuff, and if they help the people who are running the little companies that are their customers get bigger and meet other people, then it grows iX Systems' customer base, right? the customers they have get bigger and need to buy more hardware, and the community gets bigger and brings in more companies and more people hear about it.
Yeah, and I think
it's mostly because the people that run the company want to do it.
I think Scale Engine is a real world living example of that. And it's pretty exciting stuff. And IX Systems has systems that range from something you could put in a small business, home office type setup like a FreeNAS Mini, all the way up to stuff that is almost unbelievably powerful, that is something that they have conceptualized at IX Systems and delivered on, and they have the expertise to do it. Go over to ixsystems.com/TechSNAP. They've also got the ultimate guide to buying a new server for open source, 11 key traits you must absolutely demand from your provider. If you're kind of stuck in that corporate mirage of like, oh, we're not sure which OEM we should go with, which provider's better, get this. It'll help kind of move the dialogue forward. And also just give a look over at ixsystems.com/TechSNAP and just browse through their site. And if you have any questions, of course, they've got excellent customer service. You can give them a ring and ask those questions, or go to MeetBSD and ask them in person. I mean, that's honestly what I do. I have little little things that I think of throughout time. Like I was this guy, Alan. I went up to the IX Systems booth at OSCON, and I was like, can I open up that FreeNAS Mini? Can I take the side off and just look inside there? I had to be that guy. Out of everybody at OSCON, nobody come up and asked to open up the FreeNAS Mini. And they're like, heck yeah, you can. That's a great idea. And so I opened it up there at their booth.
At MeetBSD in 2012, which was the last time there was one, the guys from Netflix brought one of their CDN boxes. Ooh. And we got to tear that apart.
Man, I wish I was going to MeetBSD. That sounds like a lot of fun.
Yep.
You should make a transit through Seattle, Alan, and just come by and say hi. Just saying.
What? You should come to MeetBSD.
I know. That's really what should happen. You're right about that. Maybe.
I think my transit's through Denver.
Oh yeah, of course, because you're coming from the. Yeah, I could almost drive. That's the crazy thing is I could almost drive. Well, I'll give it some thought. I'm going to be at Ohio Linux Fest in October, so it's October, November, a little close for traveling for a family man, but I'll give it some thought. I definitely will. Hey, 2 stories that I covered in today's Tech Talk today. I just wanted to give a plug for. In episode 42, the NSA's Monster Mind, we talked about that. And then BSD Now, episode 50, you guys talked with Mr. Watson, Richard Watson, right?
Robert Watson.
Robert Watson about FreeBSD architecture, security research techniques, exploit mitigation, I'm sure all other kinds of stuff as well.
The inventor of Capsicum.
Wow.
Sandboxing framework that Google is currently trying to port to Linux.
Yeah. Episode 50 was just released today of BSD Now, and episode 42 of Tech Talk today was just released.
We'll have to talk to him some more, because we didn't really get to talk much to him about Berry, the new CPU he has invented, or his research group has.
Wow.
Which is a CPU designed with security in mind.
That could be a whole episode on its own right there.
Yeah.
And this interview, you got this one in person, right?
Yes, this one was one we recorded while I was in Cambridge. If you remember, we did the double episode to cover the fact that I was going to the UK
about
6 weeks ago, almost now.
Yeah.
So that one we recorded in person. It was myself and off camera. The running everything was actually Jonathan Price, Price TX from the chat room.
Awesome.
Who came out to the developer summit with me to learn to become a ports committer.
That's really cool. Well, there you go. We'll have those over at jupiterbroadcasting.com. We have more show, of course, but I just like to give you, at this point in the show, a couple other shows you could go get in your download queue while you watch the rest of TechSNAP. So there's a couple episodes for you. But, Alan, I think, is that everything we wanted to cover in the news segment?
That's the end of the news.
All right, then you know what that means. It's time for the TechSNAP feedback. Thanks for sending your emails to TechSNAP at jupiterbroadcasting.com or popping that contact link at the top of the Jupiter Broadcasting website, or even better, starting a thread in our subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv. And Alan, our first email is just for you, and it comes in from Tony. Hi guys, longtime viewer of the show, he writes, and a supporter of the JB Network. Tony, you're already my favorite. I recall from a few episodes back that Alan got himself a Firefox OS developer phone. I'm very interested to know what Alan's thoughts are on Firefox OS. I've been looking for an open source alternative to Google's Android. Yes, there is ASOP. I'm currently using CM11 on my HTC One, but ASOP seems crippled. Maybe by design, without proprietary services like Google Play and the Google Play Store, and of course all of the other things like Maps and everything that comes with it. Keep up the great work. Greetings from down under. So Alan, Tony's curious how the Firefox OS phone's working out for you.
Well, it depends.
Which do you have?
I have the it's the Alcatel Flame, which is also called the Firefox Flame, and it was $170 from ebuying.com or whatever it was. Okay. If you go to Mozilla's website, they have a link to buy the right one. So this one's specifically a developer model, so it has a bunch of features like you can boot it with only half the RAM enabled, so you can simulate what it would be like on a older device.
Yep,
stuff.
I like that.
Specifically, in his question, he mentions, that the phone's crippled by not having proprietary services like Google Play. Well, any open source one's not going to have Google Play or the Play Store, and so it's kind of like, do you want the Google apps or not? If you do, then you have to use the Google OS, right?
Yeah, that's
the Google Play services provide a lot of useful things, like the sync with your various things. Although a lot of that works okay on the Firefox phone. Like I've got it set up here, so it has my Google Calendar in my Firefox phone.
Oh, nice.
I think it has my Gmail and stuff, and it imported my contact list and stuff. But I haven't pulled the SIM out of my phone and put it in here yet to see if it even works. So I haven't actually done much on the phone. But honestly, my phone is almost all just phone calls and text messages. And so the Firefox phone, missing a lot of the apps isn't going to be a huge deal for me. Although the one thing I'll miss is my banking app for depositing checks. Especially my second bank is an online-only bank. So it's the only way to do it.
So does that mean you would have to keep an Android phone around?
Possibly, but then that doesn't really work for me either, because I'm only going to have one phone at a time, obviously. So
yeah, for sure. I mean, that could get hectic. What about
and the thing with the Firefox OS is my understanding is all the apps are HTML5, not native, and so I don't know how they would build the same app for a Firefox OS.
Yeah,
or just the phone these type of phone being popular enough that a bank would bother.
There's that question too. I suppose if you had the disposable income, you could have a Nexus tablet and a Firefox phone, and you could do the banking on the Nexus tablet, and that kind of hokey stuff like that. So is that really the only thing you have though?
Because I haven't used it enough to actually know much about it.
What about you? Got any sense of
battery life? I played Sudoku on it. The battery life seemed very good, although part of that was the fact that it wasn't
not heavy
doing
usage.
much, right? When it's not on the cell network, there's no standby usage on the cell network either, right? Because there's no SIM card installed in it.
And which always gets some great battery life. Yeah. I played with one at OSCON, and to me it seemed slightly sluggish, but I was also thinking to myself,
much sluggish. Although when you go into the game section to pull up the list of games, that appears to actually go online and get the list online. And so when my Wi-Fi wasn't that great, I couldn't actually get the list of games to play them. It's if I'm in airplane mode or something, I still want to be able to play the game.
Right, that's true. I've had moments where I thought to myself, I could almost just use a feature phone, and I don't necessarily even need a smartphone. So something like Ubuntu Touch or something like Firefox OS, to me, seems particularly appealing because you would have essentially a feature phone plus, a little bit more. And you could have some apps that would be beyond what feature phones could do. But if you don't need much more than email, text messaging, making calls, and that one other app, Firefox OS kind of almost seems like I like it out of all the other candidates. I would honestly rather have a Firefox OS phone than, say, the Nexus 5 if I didn't necessarily feel like... See, for me, I want Waze, and I want Google Maps, and I want, the Hughes app to Google control my lights.
You might be able to get, as the web browser version or whatever.
Yeah. Well, and that's true. That's true. And Nokia actually has a pretty respectable mapping service called Here, and they are licensing it to non-Android platforms right now. So that might also be, there may be a Here app from Nokia at some point for Firefox OS, because now that Microsoft bought the Nokia phone division, the services, the guys that run the Now stuff from Nokia, all of them, they are all still at Nokia. They didn't go over to Microsoft, and now they are licensing their technology to other smartphone platforms. So it is, even though Firefox doesn't have an answer today, it is possible that Firefox OS could take advantage of Nokia's infrastructure. Ubuntu Touch announced a partnership with Nokia Here Maps. So Ubuntu Touch phones will have Nokia Maps. That's the best. They actually have some really good stuff. So that could be a way. It's not there yet, but there is hope, I think, for Firefox
that's the other
OS.
thing to make sure to understand about a Firefox phone is this is a developer phone designed so that people can start writing apps for it.
Right. It's early days.
Meaning there aren't many apps for it yet.
Right. Right. And developers like Nokia could be working on these things right now. And if you had BlackBerry release BlackBerry Messenger for Firefox OS, then you've got a competent messaging application. You know, these are just examples. Maybe it could be Hangouts or
honestly,
whatever.
my main uses are calls and text messages, and it'll do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like a
my
couple
problem
of extra apps would be helpful.
I very rarely use my phone to actually make calls. You know,
I almost never make calls, but I receive the 800 number forwards to my phone.
And you have to be able, as somebody like, yourself who operates a small business, like from time to time, you have to have a phone that is available so you can take care of important business stuff. So it is an important thing.
I just thought of another thing I use my phone for that wouldn't work without
Android?
Or on the Firefox phone yet. It's the Audible app.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that is a problem. And Audible is one of those things that's almost...
Well, it's owned by Amazon.
Yeah. I don't know if now that Amazon has their own smartphone platform, I don't know how motivated they are to support the underdog.
Yeah. And what would be really nice is if the one feature from the Audible app was available on the Kindle, the actual physical device. No, the Kindle does the sync.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't do the sleep function.
Oh, the sleep timer.
Turn off after 15 minutes.
That's critical.
Yeah.
That's
it
mandatory.
Is. If you're trying to use it to fall asleep,
which is great
for the 8 hours is no good.
No good. No good
wake
at
me
all.
back up.
Yeah. By the way, I don't know if I've said it on the TechSNAP program. The Martian, best Audible book I've probably listened to in the last 3 years. Amazing Audible book, and The Martian is based off a ton of science that our mutual friend Heather's company has come up with. Like, it is essentially the things that Heather and I talked about on SciByte for the last 2 years, whenever we got to the Mars segment, applied to a real life, ish scenario, and it is so gratifying, so satisfying, so amazing. The Martian, it's a book you should get. I'm just saying, if you don't get an Audible, go get it in paperback. But the Audible book is one of the best Audible books I have gotten in the last 3 years. It is amazing. I think the only other book that I have found this good is the Stephen King time travel book, which was also incredible in Audible. Really good book. So, unsolicited plug. I don't make any money. Actually, we do have an Audible affiliate link at the bottom of the site. You could use that. But I am 2 hours away from finishing The Martian, and I think this has been one of the best books I've ever read in my life. So go check that one out. And it's great because it's a man who gets stranded on Mars, and it's within our relative, I think it's within my lifetime in the future, and how he survives is so amazing. And it has the possibility to be a very dark book, where you could see it's a book where a man struggles with crippling loneliness as he's the only person on this planet. But it actually turns out not to be that. It's sort of a celebration of human endurance and the human spirit, and it's a really good book. Speaking of Audible. All right, Alan. Our next email comes in from Otto with a jobs question. He says, my question is this. How wise is it to get a job without a degree? How big is the chance of getting stuck on the same job? Kind of getting in that zone where you just don't move on. You just kind of do the same thing over and over again.
No matter what, it's pretty wise to get a job as opposed to not.
And he says he plans to get the CISSP, Red Hat, and FreeBSD certs down the road. What do you think, Alan?
So in general,
he has no college degree. That's what he's worried about.
Stuck in the same job?
Well, he's worried that his no college degree is going to limit him down the road.
Possibly, but it probably makes sense to have a job and then deal with the problem as opposed to not. And if you feel that you're stuck, you can always decide to leave and find something somewhere else, or to go on to go back to school or whatever. But if you can find a job where it doesn't require the degree, having some experience at that job as opposed to not will definitely make it easier to get the next job, right?
Yeah, experience.
It's Yeah, it's much easier to get stuck in not having a job than to get stuck with a job. There are many people who would love to have the problem of being stuck in their job.
Yeah, that's very true.
As opposed to being stuck without a job.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think too, I've mentioned this before.
The biggest thing that can make up for lack of a degree is experience. It's like,
yes,
I already know how to do these things. I've been doing it for a while.
Like experience to me, not to downplay the degrees too much, especially those of you working on them right now. Experience to me though is so much more beneficial. And a track record of adaptability is also something that I looked at when I was hiring candidates. Problem solving capabilities. So Otto, if you feel like you're getting stuck, the only reason you'd be stuck is if you're not selling yourself right. What you need to do is like picture yourself as building a resume as you work through this job. And think about projects that you get involved with and how you could put that on a resume as a selling point for yourself. Now that you have a job, you are building a portfolio of work. Think of it that way. So when you go to the next potential employer, you will have a record. So what does that mean? That means keep notes, Otto. Keep notes. That way, when it comes time to make that resume,
you're not going to remember all the things that you did.
No way.
But if you write stuff down as you do it, then you know, here's a list of things I did.
Exactly. So Otto, if you do that, you will find that even if you're stuck in a job that's not exactly in the trajectory that you want, the things you do there can help you accumulate sort of a war chest of accomplishments that when you go to the next job, you can show that to them. And if they say, okay, I see experience, I see troubleshooting, I see part of the team, I see somebody who's implementing solutions, that's really all it takes.
Yeah. And so also, if you're applying for jobs and you don't have much in the way of experience, the other things to do is put on hobbies and volunteer work and stuff like that. Like, when we were looking to hire someone for a project back when I worked at the college, we interviewed a bunch of these candidates that are, in this particular case, it was all students who were in their last year of the programming course there. They're in the third and last year, and this was between their second to last and the last semesters. Over the summer, they would be working on a project. And a bunch of them, it's like, yeah, well, I've taken the PHP classes here, but that's all I've done. And, a couple of them was like, well, at my last co-op job, I worked on it a little bit, so I know a little bit about it other than what I did in the class. And then there was the guy who had been using it, and he was trying to write his own MMO. Obviously, not really something that was going to go anywhere, but in his spare time, he was, actually working with it and learning it and kind of showing that drive to actually do stuff. And that's the guy that we picked for the project. And then when that project was over and he finished school, I hired him, and he works in my basement now.
With a chain.
Something like that.
All right, Alan.
Very, very loose chain, because we let him go live in Scotland for a year and come back.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Well, it's a long chain, Emmett writes in, and he says, hello, Alan, Chris, and the IRC room. Well, that's nice. I emailed in a couple of months ago in regards to building a cloud at work. I didn't provide the information to fully answer the question I had and got very busy, so I kind of put it on the backside. However, I have since talked with Alan in IRC a little after sending the email, and I asked some questions in the subreddit. This was enough for me to get started and point in the right direction, and I just finished building an OpenStack cloud as an IaaS system. Unfortunately, I was unable to build it in FreeBSD at the moment, but in the future, I will be looking into migrating it all over. Thanks for the amazing shows, Emmett. Alan, I had a question. What is FreeBSD's situation in terms of OpenStack? I have no idea.
There's... believe it's Semi-Half that's working on making the changes to OpenStack and libvirt so that it'll support Beehive, so that your the compute clusters could be hosted on FreeBSD.
So I can run FreeBSD machines, but I can't use FreeBSD machines as
the host.
As the host
stuff. Yeah.
Okay.
That's the part that's being worked on right now and should be solved.
So I guess Emmett must have popped in the IRC chat room at some time, and you and him chatted about it.
But so basically, just to describe what a private cloud for a company might look like. Normally, you'd have a bunch of servers, right? You have like an email server and a file server and Active Directory server and so on.
Yeah. Database.
Well, each of those is a piece of hardware, and it's got so much RAM, so much CPU, or whatever. And in the end, maybe that one server that runs the accounting application or whatever doesn't really use that much CPU or RAM. right? And say the file server uses lots of space but doesn't use a lot of CPU and RAM either. So with a cloud, the idea would be, you would just have 2 or 4 much even bigger servers, and then run all those different apps as VMs on there with like live migration or load balancing or something, right? So you have the couple of machines that are bigger, and they run the VMs and maybe live migrate one to the other to load balance them and stuff. And so basically it allows you to use up that slack, right? That app that isn't using all the RAM, you could be giving that RAM to a different machine, right? So if you had 4 machines that each have 16 gigs of RAM, well, if you transition each of those to a VM on one machine that has 64 gigs of RAM, which is the same total amount of RAM, but it means that the RAM that's not being used on that second machine could be rerouted to the first machine and so on, right? And it allows you to better utilize stuff. Or if you did it with 4 bigger machines, then you could do stuff like after hours, live migrate the VMs off down to just 2 machines, and the other 2 machines could be powered off until people show up for work again.
Yep.
And then they could be powered by the load balancer.
I worked for a company that was producing inverters and solar panels, and that's exactly what we did. They built their own. Alan, have you ever worked with you worked at a power company, right?
Yeah.
When you worked at that power company, did they build their own UPSs and stuff? Like,
they had like a semi-custom one. It was basically, it looked like a refrigerator full of car batteries.
Yeah, exactly. That's what these guys did. And so, of course, their engineers were always over there tweaking it and stuff because that's what they did. That's what the company did. And so they wanted to set up a whole thing where they could prove with charts, because all this stuff collected data, that when we shut down the systems at night, they would save X amount of money, and then they would talk to their clients about that. So we had the same thing. We had VMware ESX attached to an iSCSI Ecologic storage, and at nighttime, some of the ESX servers would shut down. We'd do a live migration, and then around 7 or 8 a.m. when the demand would call for it, the VMware ESX boxes that were shut down overnight would turn back on. They would spin up the VMs. They would do so. I don't remember what it's called, but it was some sort of network transfer of the memory state from one machine to the
migration.
other. Yeah, the live whatever that particular aspect of the live migration is called. They did that, and then it would spin it right up. And it was really pretty cool system, and it was really well once you set it, it really managed itself quite well, and you could base it on CPU demands or anything like that.
Actually, I just saw an article on Slashdot yesterday, I think, about Facebook using more advanced load balancing algorithms to do almost the same thing.
It makes sense. You save money.
They save about 10% of their power. Just if you have 4 machines, a regular load balancing concept is spread the load evenly across those 4 machines, right? Which generally makes sense. None of them get maxed out. Whereas instead, if you do something like keep 2 of the machines at like 90% of their capacity, and then the third one gets the runoff, and the fourth one is completely idle, so its CPU goes into a lower power saving state and saves a lot of power.
Yeah, and produces less heat, so it also is less money to cool the server room. I had a situation where in the summertime, and this sounds like a joke, but this is how jank this place was. In the summertime, at night, and in the late afternoon, their server room would overheat. So you know what we did? We consolidated. We reduced the physical amount of machines that were pumping out hot air, and it actually made a difference. And
especially back then when power saving states weren't really a thing, where the CPU wouldn't clock down and stuff. It would just sit there running full power all the time.
Yeah. Anyways, Jason wrote in. Ready for the next email? Jason writes in, and this is just kind of not really a question so much as I think Jason's been in the industry for a while, and he wants to share. So he says, not really a question, just sharing some news. Plus, I felt sorry that you guys had to beg for emails. Yeah, it's been the summer dry period, although it's starting to pick back up, but we do need your emails. Not sure if you guys ever used Open VMS systems before. A fantastic operating system. In fact, Open VMS, you might be familiar with it known as VAX 11 or VMS or VAX VMS or just VMS. So it's been known by a few names. Anyways, he says, not sure if you've ever used an Open VMS system before. It's a fantastic operating system. I used to use them in college on Alpha machines. HP currently owns the rights, and we're about to kill it off. So, and he links us to a Computer Word article about that. And then it sounds like, though, HP might be giving it new life. He says, I was a sysadmin for these things back in the day. The reason why I loved Open VMS so much is because it solved so many problems which we are now reinventing under a different name. OpenVMS had clustering sorted, a clustered file system. It ran minis all the way up to huge iron boxes. Even today, it has support for many of the most common open source products like Apache. We seem to have lost 25 years of computing just because OpenVMS never made it to x86. I miss the stability, the batch processing, the clustering, the preventive maintenance engineers for the digital equipment itself. The system runs on banks, it runs satellite uplinks, ship-to-shore communications, insurance companies, no fuss, no drama. It's just not very shiny anymore. I try to get it as close as I can running Linux-based systems under the Oracle file system using DRDB and KeepAliveD, ColorSync, Pacemaker, but none of these things together are like a VMS system. I hope this new company to bring OpenVMS to x86, it's not just a nostalgic hobby, but I hope they actually do it. What say you? Alan, do you think sometimes you feel like there's certain things that is like, gosh, have we lost 25 years in the industry?
Well, a lot of times we kind of see history repeating itself along the lines of...
Yes, very much so, huh?
You know, basically we went from mainframes down to the mini computers and then servers, and then now we're kind of with virtualization is like, let's go back to having just a couple of really big servers and dividing them up using virtual machines.
And cloud computing like Google Docs and all of this stuff, it's all, you just have
basically
a dumb client.
turning your computer back into a dumb client.
Yes.
And it's just connecting over the network to the machine that actually has the files on it.
Doesn't it feel a little bit like history repeating itself? Like, haven't we seen this?
Yeah, I kind of noticed this, like, especially on the BSDs and stuff. There's always these people that are obsessed with keeping these old things alive. Like, it's just like the Spark 64 stations and the VAX. Like, the OpenBSD guys actually have a VAX and they compile the packages natively on it. Although I think it broke down recently, and they were looking for someone to donate a new VAX, someone out of their museum hardware. It's old dead hardware. Is it?
Yeah. You really need to. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, but for some reason it tends to really appeal to certain types of people that tend to be the type of people that are the prolific open source hackers.
And I guess maybe they can appreciate some of the attributes that made that system great, right?
Yeah, or especially some of the different CPU architectures and just how they're different than x86.
I find it too. You find with some of the higher end audio equipment, there, for example, the mixer that I am using right now, some of the equipment that they are recreating virtually is from the 60s and the 50s and the 70s. Like, they never made it better than they did back then. And now the only thing that's better about it is that it's virtualized and they've just recreated it in software. But they're recreating some of those original things. And sometimes, when something is truly, genuinely, properly thought through, well-designed, well-engineered, and built really solid, it's just a good product, and I think it just gets people love it. I've looked at things like Proxmox now and KVM and things like that, when I started working in the banking industry, it was all mainframes, and it was a lot of virtualization, and they were doing a lot of things back then that we are just now getting on the PC. Fiber connectivity was still faster than Thunderbolt connections, right? All of these little things that they had back in the 80s that we actually still don't have. So I think there's a lot of little things. In fact, this would be a great topic for the audience to send in. Is there a piece of technology from way back that you felt like got it right, or that we are just now finally getting back to reinventing? I would love to hear about that. Go over to jupiterbroadcasting.com, click our contact link, and choose TechSNAP from the drop-down. I'm curious about that. I'm not sure. I think there are a few things. In virtualization, we all think of it. That's the other thing, Alan, is we all think of virtualization as this brand new thing. We just finally got virtualization, but it's been around.
And it's more that, it was just really slow up until we got the hardware-assisted virtualization.
For our crappy systems. But the guys at the Big Iron, man, they had that thing dialed in decades ago, literally.
Yeah. Generally, I avoid being nostalgic about old hardware and stuff.
Yeah.
I really like the new stuff.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
If you are interested, the book that I was lent by another professor was The Soul of a New Machine. And it's about the design of like the PDP-10 or something. And it kind of walks through how they thought out the design and what was happening at the company and how things were.
Have you seen Halt and Catch Fire at all? Have you heard about it?
No.
It's a TV drama. I think it might be HBO. I'm not sure about that. It's one of the more premier cable networks, or maybe it's just AMC. I think it's just the guys that made Mad Men, actually, now that I think about it.
Okay.
Anyways, it's a TV series about the reverse engineering of the BIOS, the creation of the BIOS in a clean room, then the need to create a software platform around that, and they've made a television series out of the origins of, the clone PCs, essentially. And it's kind of interesting. I don't think it's that accurate, but I've watched... Whoa, hi there. Hi. I've watched about half the episodes, and it's been okay. While we reconnect with Alan, because we're having Skype problems, it's actually just fine because we just reached the end of the feedback segment, so we'll take a segment break right here. If you'd like to send us an email, go over to jupiterbroadcasting.com, click that contact link, choose TechSNAP from the drop-down, and send us an email, or you can also go over to techsnap.reddit.com and start a feedback thread there. Send it into the show. We'd be happy to answer. In fact, we'd love to answer because this is the summer dry season, so if you've got a question, something maybe we've even missed in the past, now is your chance to get in because it is the summertime. Email volume goes down. Once the bad weather comes back, people will be sitting at their desk. They'll be sending their emails. It gets much harder to get your question to the TechSNAP show. So now is a great time. TechSNAP at jupiterbroadcasting.com or the contact link or links.techsnap.tv. And with that all done, it's time for the TechSNAP Roundup. Welcome to the TechSNAP Roundup. Yeah, that's what that crazy music means. Now, the Roundup of stories just didn't fit at the top of the show, but we still want to give you some links to follow up on your own. And a lot of these links came from our incredibly amazing, fantastic subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv, which has been around longer than Reddit itself. Actually, 200 years. Links.techsnap.tv. Our first story this week, I just put this at the top of the roundup because it made me just smile and laugh a little bit. Turns out Google spends tons of money just to keep sharks from eating its underwater cables. Now, why would Google's cables be so tasty? Well, we'll get to that. Here's the details. According to Network World, Dan Blecher wrote, the product manager on Google was talking to him, and he recently revealed that Google actually wraps its trans-Pacific fiber cables in Kevlar to make sure they're 100% shark-proof. While Network World doesn't give any dollar figures for how much the cost is, Yahoo News is imagining that it's expensive since, well, Kevlar isn't cheap.
Expensive.
Yeah, and they're also doing
thousands
of miles.
Yeah, thousands of miles of cable.
So the sharks, they think, are attracted to Google's fiber cables because unlike short-haul terrestrial fiber cables or old copper cables that are in there, the Google fiber cables, they emit a noticeable high-voltage electromagnetic field that the sharks could be picking up on and thinking are fish in distress. So the sharks are like, oh, that's a tasty fish down there. And they go and they're nomming on the on the Google fiber at the bottom of the ocean. So they can't get them to stop nomming, so they've just wrapped them in Kevlar. I thought that was really funny. Alan, our next story in the roundup, a study finds that firmware is plagued by poor encryption and backdoors. Not a surprise here, I suppose.
Yeah, so researchers at the French graduate school EURECOM basically went out and downloaded the firmware for every device they get their hands on.
Oh, smart.
They went to D-Link, Linksys, all the different places that make internet-exposed devices that have firmware, and they grabbed all the firmware, like a huge number of different firmware images, and then they extracted and decompiled them and started running them through static analysis. And so far, they've found 38 unique vulnerabilities affecting 123 different devices. And they've since reported those to the vendors, and hopefully we'll see fixes.
So they're as much of a train wreck as we expected, sounds like.
Yeah. And this is just static analysis. They didn't even have the devices and weren't poking at them. This is just what they could find with automated scanning.
I look at this and I think to myself, this is what exactly defines the problem with consumer electronics that are super cheap, that have these pre-flashed operating systems. Right here, this study just sort of puts a fine point on that problem, doesn't it?
Yeah, and basically what they're talking about is offering a web service where companies could submit their firmware and have it tested. So maybe this will come towards actually having a solution to that problem.
Ooh, I like that idea.
The current downside, obviously, is that people don't update their firmware. Other things. And it may be possible once the firmware updates come out that solve these problems for someone to take the new and the old firmware, compare them, and actually be able to figure out what the vulnerability was and then exploit it against everybody that hasn't updated their firmware.
Probably, yeah.
And on top of all the other reasons why people don't update, especially firmware type stuff, oftentimes there's that chance you'll brick your device.
Yeah, it's not broke. Don't fix
your
it.
BIOS. Even the manufacturers will say, don't install this firmware update unless you have a reason to.
And there's a lot of there's a lot of good old boys walking around out there telling friends and family, "Oh, don't update if it's not broken." There's a lot of that's an old school of thought, and it's still pervasive.
Yep, and we try to talk people out of it, and then a story further down the page happens.
All right. Well, before we get to that,
the other thing is that the paper on this firmware research is being published at Usenix. If you're signed up for the conference, you can get the paper now, but the paper will be available publicly when the conference starts on Monday.
Oh.
So you'll be able to read the full paper on this research on Monday.
All right, Alan, grab your salt. This is from an interview that Snowden gave to Wired. I'll just quick aside. This would be some of the first solid technical NSA cyber attack information that we have gotten directly from Edward Snowden, the man, and not via Glenn Greenwald or the Washington Post. So that is unique in its own. And here's what Snowden had to say. The NSA, not Assad, took Syria off the internet in 2012. Now, this is a story I believe we covered in a Wired interview. Snowden says that while it was claimed that Assad was behind it, it was actually the U.S. that actually took out most of Syria off the internet while attempting to bug the country's traffic. Snowden said that back in 2013, when he was still working for the NSA, he was told by U.S. intelligence officers that the NSA hackers, not the Assad regime, had been responsible for Syria's sudden disconnect from the internet in November and December of 2012. The NSA's Tailored Access Group, also known as TAO, has been attempting to exploit vulnerabilities in the router of major internet service providers in Syria. The exploit would have allowed the NSA to redirect traffic from the router through the systems tapped by the agencies. And then, of course, they would be able to do packet sniffing, pump it all through X keyscore, which was actually the main goal, so then they could pull out emails and things like that. Instead, TAO's hackers accidentally bricked the router. Snowden described an event as an oh shit moment where the TAO operator center team tried to repair the router and cover their tracks. Fortunately for the NSA, the Syrians were apparently more focused on restoring the internet than tracking down the cause of the outage. Snowden said that they joked around and said...
They probably just thought the device just died, as
right.
routers tend to do sometimes.
And I love this part. Snowden said that the group joked around and said, well, hey, look, man, if we ever get caught, we can just point the finger at Israel. No bigs. The Syrian state television at the time blamed it on terrorists, which we all handily just said, oh, that's crap. We mocked it. The outage at the time...
Turns out it was actually terrorists.
Yeah, it turns out it was U.S. terrorists. And they were, by the way, the gear they were going after was monitoring gear from Blue Coat. Oh, no, I'm sorry. One of the reasons we thought it might be legitimate is because Syria had previously used illegally obtained network monitoring gear from Blue Gear to break SSL. So it's not like the Assad regime had some great track record here. So there was some reason to buy into the suspicion that, there was something wonky going on. Mm-hmm. And who knows? Maybe what's interesting about this is this isn't Snowden saying, I can confirm I saw this. What Snowden is saying is, I had guys tell me, and they say they went down like this. So, like I said, bring your salt. This next one is a tweet. I love it when we get tweets, because you can get so much out of these days. Why Nigerian scam emails are so poorly written. I've often wondered this, Alan.
Yeah, so basically, if you consider this sample of you send out 1,000 emails, say the first 1,000 are badly written junk, and the second 1,000 are very well written, right? Well, on the junk ones, you'll get 0.1% of the people to click on it and or fall for it, right? Or just do whatever the email asks you to do. So out of 1,000 people, that's 1 to 2 people that will read and understand the poorly written email. Of those 1 or 2 people, 70% of them are gullible enough to do whatever the scammer's trying to get. So that equals 1 fool with their money parted from them, right? So you can rob the 1 person. So 1,000 emails and you get 1 guy to pay you. Now, if you write 1,000 really good emails, that takes a lot more work. And out of that, you get 100 people that actually read the email and think it's legit. Mm-hmm. Of those 100 people, only 0.07% of them are gullible, which results in the same 1 person paying you.
Yeah.
So do a lot of work to get 1 person, or do a little bit of work to get 1 person.
So this is interesting. So it would seem that you essentially, what you're saying is you get the same results, good spelling, bad spelling, good grammar, bad grammar, so why bother?
Yeah. Yeah, basically, if you do the bad grammar, then fewer people will fall for it, but the people who do are that much more gullible that you'll get the same conversion rate.
There you go. There you go. There you go. Wow. Yeah, because I was going to say, I mean, what always tips it off is those
and bad grammar tends to get through spam filters better.
Oh.
Because when you write something how no one would ever have written it because you're just that bad at English or purposely doing it, then...
Yes, that's a good point.
It basically turns out that, it doesn't have to be good because, well, you get fewer people to fall for it. The people that do fall for it are that much more gullible.
We often talk about Patch Tuesday. This one's being called Black Patch Tuesday because the new patches are bringing blue screens of death. 2 Microsoft kernel mode driver updates, which often cause problems, are triggering BSOD error messages on some Windows systems, InfoWorld reports. Details at this point are a bit sparse, but it looks like 3 different patches from this week's Black Tuesday crop are causing blue screens with a stop 0x50 error on some systems. If you're getting that blue screen of death, you can help diagnose the problem and give the information to Microsoft by adding your voice to the Microsoft Answers forum thread, which we have linked in the show notes. They need your help. They don't know why it's crashing.
Yeah, and by getting information from a bunch of different people, it would make them easier to narrow down the common denominator.
I mean, this is something to their credit that used to be a big problem that they have gotten a lot better about.
Yes, and then we were just talking about, convincing, if your system's working, don't install the updates because it might break something. And generally it's been, no, it's fine. Microsoft's got much better. They don't break stuff anymore. Install your updates. Now it's like, except this week when they broke everything.
Yes, that's why if you're an enterprise, do staged rollouts, my friends. In fact, use Windows Update Service, set up some testing groups.
Testing groups, then stage rollout. There's a reason why when Facebook does a change,
it's staged.
1,000 people see it, and then 1%, and one state, and then so that it's easier to roll back.
This next story actually makes a lot of sense in light of some recent revelations we've had around the iPhone and some of the backdoors in there. This article suggests the biggest iPhone security risk actually is connecting to a computer, maybe turning off Wi-Fi sync, things like that, right?
Yeah. Basically, the malware, instead of being able to run on the phone, it runs on the computer and then accesses the phone. Or specifically in this article, they're talking about rather than actually some exploit or something that happens on the phone, it's just working through the loopholes that are already in Apple's transfer protocol when you connect it to a computer.
And the iTunes Wi-Fi sync functionality is, I believe, security-wise, equivalent to taking your iPhone and physically plugging it into your machine, only it's over Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
And those services are running then on the phone.
Hopefully you're connecting to the right machine when you do that over the Wi-Fi.
But wouldn't the problem be that if you turn that functionality on to begin with, there must be some sort of background daemon then running on the iPhone that's listening for a connection from an iTunes computer on your Wi-Fi network, and so it's always available to answer incoming requests? I mean, it just seems obvious. Don't turn that on, right? So don't turn on Wi-Fi sync, and be sure the computers you trust, people don't have physical access to, because that's really how they can get you. I love this next story. It's so funny because it shows you that it doesn't matter who you are, it can happen to you. The Russian PM's Twitter has been hacked with a post that tweeted, "I'm resigning." An anti-Putin activist hacked the Twitter account of the Russian Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev on Thursday to tell his 2.5 million Twitter followers, "I'm out of here." Of course, it was pretty quickly deleted, and then people said, no, it's fake. And then he had to go on air and say, no, I'm not actually resigning. And he maintains 2 accounts, an English account and a Russian account, and it was the English account that was hacked.
Right, and I'm guessing it's probably not him that does the posts, but somebody else.
Sure. Yeah, I would think so, right?
Yes, and I do believe his name is Medvedev.
Medvedev, right? Yes. This next story has my attention. I'm kind of seeing where this one goes. Security firm Yaume, is I believe how you say it, their smartphones are secretly copying a lot of your activity to their MyCloud services. MyCloud is their ripoff of iCloud. Of course, they have the former Google executive, Hugo Barana, I believe his name was, working for them now. He's been out playing damage control. But was it F-Secure? I can't remember the company, Alan. Did you grab the company's name that was doing the research and they were doing packet monitoring on these Xiaomi phones and find they were sending like everybody you called, everybody you texted, every website you visited is being sent back.
Specifically, also setting a cookie for every post you did to the Xiaomi system with your IMEI number.
Yes.
So that was uniquely identifying your phone. And yes, also
it was F-Secure.
The first problem is that the connection to api.account.xiaomi.com is not over SSL. So anybody listening on the Wi-Fi or your connection doing man-in-the-middle or anything like that,
like the Chinese government,
would be but even just somebody at the Starbucks with you would be able to see your IMEI number and any information that was being sent to the cloud. Why it wasn't using SSL, I will never know, other than the fact that it was done on purpose.
Exactly.
And yes, it was F-Secure.
It was F-Secure.
They did the Synology thing earlier in the story.
Xiaomi is a company that is attempting to provide an Apple-like iPhone based on Android in China, and they have close relations with the Chinese government. So I am a little skeptical that perhaps some of these things were left like this for monitoring purposes, because I mean, it seems like such an egregious oversight that it almost has to be intentional. And what they found is even if you don't sign up for their MyCloud, not iCloud, don't get confused, citizen. It's MyCloud. If you sign up for their even if you don't sign up for any of their services, it's still transmitting to them. And they claim, in response, Hugo came out and he said, look, everybody calm down. We are just trying to make sure that your text message gets to its intended recipient. That's all we're doing. And we need all of this data to verify that you sent it to the right person and they got it. So look, calm down. What we're going to do to make you feel better is we'll issue a software update. And in this software update, you can opt out if you want. And not opt out of like not having encryption. No, just opt out of the services altogether. Just turn them off. You can opt out completely. And then, of course, you have to go find your own solution. It's crap.
Yeah, definitely seems like, hey, SSL.
Hey, SSL. All right, Alan, our last...
You can always give your copy of the data to the Chinese government if that's what you're worried about. I don't see why it has to be in plain text.
Actually, this is our second to last roundup story. That Grumpy BSD guy's blog writes, password gropers? Gropers. Okay. Take the spam trap bait. Tell me about this one, Alan.
Yeah. So basically, he had this website he set up with a bunch of fake generated email addresses, and then he would detect whenever an email was sent to them and know that, hey, this is spam, because nobody would send an email to this made-up email address, and so that would get them put on the blacklist. Well, then he started putting up ones with usernames and passwords as well.
Uh-oh.
And found that they were starting to be used by SSH and POP3 password guessers. And so, yeah, he was basically finding that people were trying, from that list of email addresses, they were trying to basically hack the POP3 accounts of those email addresses. Because once they, basically POP3 tended not to be covered by the password brute force protectors, because it's kind of an old thing, and if anybody's still running it, that's probably been set up a long time.
POP3, right?
Yeah. But usually the same server will also accept mail via SMTP once you have the username and password.
Sure.
So you do the brute force against the POP3 to get the password for the email address.
Oh, of course.
And then you can use the SMTP to actually send the email.
Yeah.
Plus, possibly you could use the whole stolen email account, right? So you can actually receive the replies because you have the POP3 access as well.
And pull down all their emails.
Yeah, or specifically pull down replies to your spam or whatever.
People do use POP3 still. I actually... See, the thing about POP3 is it makes sense...
The nice thing that killed it was people all of a sudden having multiple devices.
Yes.
Right? Being able to mark an email as read on your computer and have it show up right on your phone and vice versa was a big thing. So IMAP definitely wins.
Yeah, for sure. Here's where POP3 still has legitimate use, is you can have a shell script running on a headless server that's popping into your machine, and it's copying down a copy of everything, not deleting it when it pulls it, but just, POP3 is a great solution for an automated backup where you just want a machine that has a copy of everything.
IMAP as well.
That's true. That's true.
Or just like things like Gmail have the copy and forward type setup.
I'm thinking though there is a specific Thunderbird extension, and I can't remember the name of it, but I have it, and it connects over POP3, and it stores it all into like it takes your inbox and puts it all into like this HTML file and makes it like a nice indexed backup of it, but it only supports POP3. I mean, weird. Yeah, it's gonna go away, I'm sure. But
IMAP is nice because you can also upload files with it.
Yeah,
like,
well,
put emails back into the account.
For me, the big thing is, of course, being the same red state across all of them. Now,
right, but also being able to push data back instead of being one way also lets you do stuff like calendars and stuff.
If I'm not mistaken, we are going to end the roundup the only way to appropriately end a massive roundup, and that is with a huge PDF, right? Isn't that our last link? It's not even a website; it's a PDF.
Yeah, it's another paper from Usenix, but the people who wrote the paper published it on their own website, so you can get it before Usenix starts.
Oh, nice!
Because their talk isn't until like next week, 2 weeks away. Anyway, these guys were working with a NGO, a non-governmental organization that was being targeted by the Chinese government. And unlike companies that were the target, the NGO is willing to share all the information about what was happening to them.
Oh, interesting.
So this is understanding what targeted malware attacks actually look like by someone that's willing to give away more of the information than most companies would be willing to let happen about them. But they talk about the majority of the attacks were using malicious documents, embedded in a Word doc or an Excel doc or something like that. Using recent but disclosed vulnerabilities. So they weren't using 0 days, but using stuff that was very, very new, like just discovered and probably not patched yet, that kind of stuff. And that evades virus scanners and stuff.
Sure.
They also receive malware from different families of malware, and a quarter of the malware can be linked to entities that have reported to engage in targeted attack against political or industrial organizations in Tibet and so on. They talk about the social engineering that was used against them and all the other different tactics.
They also talk about the effectiveness of the different online email services malware scanning. So they compare Gmail, Hotmail, and Yahoo bombs on the test and show you how effective they were at screening out some of the potential malware that they tested, which is also kind of interesting, huh?
Yes.
And they also benchmark here on let's see, what page is this? Do I have on page 10? They benchmark some of the different antivirus softwares. Like, well, look at all of these. They've got AVG, ESET, Norton, McAfee, Trend Micro, all of them. Some I've never even heard of before, and how they performed.
Yeah, and this one they also specifically because they were targeting this NGO that's involved with Tibet. It happens to take a lot of their communication takes place in Uyghur, which is a language. So the Chinese attackers, they actually had people that spoke that language in order to write emails and stuff.
Oh, respect.
But they also have some examples, some of like English emails, dear person, and they're writing to you from the World Uyghur Congress on behalf of the Unrepresented Nations and Peoples Organization and blah, blah, blah. So they're like, sending fake invitations to conferences and stuff to try to get people to fall for stuff.
And the whole PDF is available for your leisure, and Alan has linked it in the roundup. So just go over to jupiterbroadcasting.com, look for TechSNAP 175, and Alan has copiously documented and linked just about every single thing we have talked about in today's episode in the show notes. Just scroll down, and they're chronologically listed, so you'll find the roundup towards the end of the show notes. Alan, is there anything else we want to cover in today's episode?
No, that's the end of the episode.
Boom. All right, well, there's a couple of bits of essential business we should probably tell you about. Number one, you got to join us live at least once. Won't you watch a live TechSNAP, please? Join us for 176 next week. We do it on Thursdays. We start at 1 p.m. Pacific, which is
4 p.m. Eastern, 2000 UTC.
Boom! Over at jblive.tv for the video, or jblive.info for the audio. Over at jblive.tv, we have the chat room embedded, but you could also just connect irc.geekshed.net, and our room is pound Jupiter Broadcasting. Couple of other neat things to let you know about. If you're a Plex user, if you've got Plex, the Jupiter Broadcasting Plex app has been featured now for a while, and I'd like to encourage you to go grab it. You can watch all of the Jupiter Broadcasting shows right on your Plex machine. How cool is that? Also, I don't normally get to say this at the end of a TechSNAP, but tomorrow, Friday, we'll have a special live edition of Tech Talk Today. I'll be joined by Angela, and we'll be discussing some interesting topics. So please join us live. We'll be doing that at a special time, too, 11 a.m. Pacific, over at jblive.tv. all of our shows, all of our live times can be converted to your local time zone automatically via robot power when you go to jupiterbroadcasting.com/calendar. Last but not least, if you're a Stitcher user, be sure you check out TechSNAP and all of our other Jupiter Broadcasting program on Stitcher. We're on there, and I figured, why not give it a mention? Maybe a few more of you could subscribe and help us move up in the Stitcher ranks. It could always be good for discoverability. Yeah? Oh, and Alan, we should probably mention we still do need your emails. It is the summer lull for TechSNAP.
Yep.
So send them over. Go over to jupiterbroadcasting.com, click the contact link, systems, network, administration, security, file systems, job, industry stuff, anything like that. Send it in to us, TechSNAP at jupiterbroadcasting.com, links.techsnap.tv, or the contact form. Either one of those things is fantastic. All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for tuning in this week's episode of TechSNAP. We'll see you right back here next week.